Hello and welcome once again to Pale Blue Thoughts, the channel which denounces pseudoscience and embraces scientific temper. All religious texts, be it from any religion, have gone through several edits throughout their histories. The same goes for any scripture, whether it claims that it was written by God or was divinely inspired. There are many versions of all these texts spread throughout the world. That itself is evidence that these are just fairy tales that humans have created from their imagination and not from any superpower above the clouds. Because had it been from a god, there wouldn't have been so many versions. People have been adding, modifying, deleting the stories to fit their imaginations and societal norms throughout human history. And today we will look at one of the epics that is famous in the Indian subcontinent. The actual meaning of its title is Rama's Ayana, which means the travels or journeys of Rama. And today, after traveling all the way from Ayodhya to Sri Lanka and back, Rama today stands outside an old mosque waiting for a temple to be built at that site. So let us walk through the history of the travels of Rama and see how it has evolved. Depending on the methods of counting, as many as 300, you heard that right, 300 versions of the Ramayana are known to exist. In fact, almost all Indian states have their own versions of the Ramayana. The oldest version is generally recognized to be the Sanskrit version attributed to the sage Narada called the Mappila Ramayana. Narada apparently passed on the knowledge to Valmiki, who authored Valmiki Ramayana, the present oldest available version of Ramayana. In reality, many forms of Ramayana exist in oral forms in many parts of the country. It was perhaps Valmiki who first wrote it all into one book. So let us see some other forms of Ramayana that exist in different forms. The Buddhists had their own version of Ramayana called Dasaratha Jataka. I'm sure you have all heard of the Jataka tales that you may have read in Amar Chitrakatha or Tinkle comics. If you're a millennial, then I'm sorry, but you could look it up. I'm sure 80s and 90s kids would remember those wonderful tales like the monkey and the crocodile, the lion and the woodpecker, and so on. Now, one of the tales was called Dasaratha Jataka. According to this tale, Dasaratha was a king who ruled over Varanasi. He had 3 children named Rama, Lakshmana, and believe it or not, Sita. After his first wife died, he remarries and has a child named Bharata from his second wife. Now the stepmother was a cruel woman, and Dasaratha, fearing that she would harm his first children, sends them to the forest. Now there was a custom in those days that to preserve the racial purity, it was allowed for brothers to marry their own sisters. So in the absence of another woman, Rama and Sita started to live together as man and wife. But the king dies after 9 years. Bharata, the son of the stepmother, being kind and honorable, refused to be crowned, as the right belonged to his older brother. He went to look for Rama and the other 2 until he found them and told the 3 about their father's death and asked Rama to come back to rule the country. But Rama refused to come back, saying he had promised his father that he would stay in exile for 14 years, and gave his footwear made of hay to Bharata, saying that it will help him make decisions for the kingdom. After the exile, Rama returned to the kingdom and everybody celebrated the event. Then he is said to have ruled the kingdom very wisely for, believe it or not, 16,000 years. Of course, anything is possible in a story, right? More than anything else, this story was used by the Buddhists to let people know that in the event that you're not able to find a woman within your same clan, instead of marrying someone outside your clan, you can even marry your sister to preserve racial purity. What a moral of the story, isn't it? Now, Jains had many versions of Ramayana. In one of the most prominent versions, called the Paumacharitram, Dasaratha ruled over Ayodhya. He had 4 princes, Padma or Rama, Narayana or Lakshmana, Bharata and Shatrugna. Janaka's daughter Sita was married to Rama. She was kidnapped by Ravana, who took her to his kingdom Lanka. Ravana's younger brother Vibhishana tried to persuade him to return Sita. However, Ravana refused to do so. In the story, Padma or Rama had 8,000 wives, whereas Narayana or Lakshmana had 16,000. So Ravana says that what is it to Padma if I capture one among the 8,000? So he refuses to listen to Vibhishana, who warns him that Padma could come and kill him since Sita was his principal consort. But Ravana laughs it off, saying that they are Jains and according to Jainism, they wouldn't kill an ant, so he would be safe. And so Padma arrives at the island, but as predicted by Ravana, Rama would not kill Ravana, because as per Jain traditions, killing anything is a big no-no. But Ravana had to be killed for Sita to be retrieved, so who would do the dirty job? So this task was given to Narayana or Lakshmana, who's not so big a god as Padma, and so he could afford to kill Ravana, which he does. After Lakshmana's death, Rama becomes a Jain monk and attains moksha. Lakshmana and Ravana, on the other hand, go to hell. Sita was reborn in heaven. Now there are many other versions of the same story in Jain culture. In another one by Swayambhu, Sita has a brother named Bhamandala. He did not know about Sita being his sister and wanted to marry her. He even wanted to abduct her. This narration ends when Bhamandala, after knowing that Sita is his sister, turns into a Jain monk. In another version by Sankadasa, Sita is said to be the daughter of Ravana's queen Mandodari. It is predicted that the first child of Mandodari would bring destruction to the family. Hence Ravana deserted the child when she was born. The minister who was responsible for this took her in a pearl box, placed her near a plough and told Janaka of Mithila that the girl was born from the trench. In another version written by Gunabhadra, Sita is again Ravana's daughter. All characters are depicted as Jains, and Rama, Sita and Lakshmana visit Jain pilgrimage sites rather than ashrams as in Valmiki Ramayana during their stay in the forest, which suits Jain traditions. Now comes the Bhakti movement and its influence on the epic. The Bhakti movement originated in South India during the 7th to 8th century CE, spread northwards from Tamil Nadu through Karnataka and gained wide acceptance in 15th century Assam, Bengal and northern India. Amongst the notable Bhakti movement scholars and poets included Shankaracharya, Tulsidas, Mirabai, Guru Nanak, Kabir Das, Purandara Das, Jayadeva Goswami and so on. Let us look at such versions now. The next version that I want to discuss is Ananda Ramayana. No, that was not written by me as it bears my name, but by someone around the 15th century. In this version, it is not Sita who gets abducted by Ravana, but Kausalya, Rama's mother. Ravana once approached Brahma inquiring him as to how his own death would come about. Brahma responded that the son of Kausalya and Dasaratha would be the cause of his death. Enraged, Ravana abducted Kausalya immediately prior to her wedding and placed her in a box on a deserted island in the middle of the ocean. And it is not Rama but Dasaratha who goes to regain his fiancée back. Well, that is the only possibility, right? Because Rama isn't born yet. Hearing of Dasaratha's rescue attempt, Ravana sent his Rakshasa or demon army. In the ensuing battle, Dasaratha's army was annihilated, but Dasaratha escaped on a wooden plank floating on the ocean for many days. Eventually, he landed on the island of Kausalya's captivity and chanced upon the box in which she was enclosed. Narada and other sages quickly arrived and performed a wedding ceremony, after which Dasaratha and Kausalya were enclosed in the box. Unaware of these events, Ravana went to Brahma and told him that his prediction had been rendered false as he had killed Dasaratha and was holding Kausalya captive in the box. Knowing that his words must always be true, Brahma had the box brought to his and Ravana's presence and opened. Seeing Dasaratha and Kausalya in the box, Ravana was humiliated and planned to kill them both, but his wife Mandodari persuaded him otherwise. Eventually, Dasaratha and Kausalya went to Ayodhya, where they lived happily. Eventually, she gave birth to Rama and his 3 brothers, and the story ends there. Sita's story appears as a subplot in this version of Ramayana. There was once a king called Padmaksha who was an ardent devotee of Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth. Now Padmaksha wanted Lakshmi to be born as his daughter, so he approached her. But Lakshmi said, "I am very sorry, but there is another department which handles these operations," and directed Padmaksha to Vishnu, who ran the operating system of giving life. Vishnu agrees to Padmaksha's wish and gives him a fruit. Padmaksha returns home with it and opens it to find a little girl inside. He realizes that this is Lakshmi and names her Sita and raises her. Now the child grows up and it's time for her to get married. So Padmaksha conducts a Swayamvara. Now the Rakshasas or demons led by Ravana comes to disrupt the ceremony and abduct the bride-to-be. So Padmaksha asks Sita to hide somewhere and she hides inside a big ball of fire. Now the Rakshasas search everywhere and is unable to spot Sita. So they start to leave when Sita comes out of the fire thinking she is safe now. But at that very moment, Ravana turns around and spots Sita coming out of the fire. He tries to abduct her, but Sita again disappears into the fire. So Ravana uses the nearest fire extinguisher and douses the fire, but instead of finding Sita, finds a jewel which he recognizes is the transmogrified version of Sita. So he takes the jewel, puts it in a box and takes it home. And each day he would open the box to see if she has transmogrified back. Now this act was spotted by Mandodari, Ravana's wife, who sneaks in one day and opens the box to find a baby girl inside. She screams that this baby will bring doom to the nation and asks the ministers to take the box away from the kingdom and bury it somewhere. So they obey her, and this box was found by Janaka, and that is how he got Sita. Now in this story, the abduction of Kaushalya was already done and dusted in the previous story, and the story of Sita is just a subplot. Another version of Ramayana was written in the 16th century by a Bhakti poet named Tulsidas. He was a contemporary of William Shakespeare and wrote his Ramcharitmanas during Akbar's reign. Tulsidas was a great scholar of Sanskrit. However, he wanted the story of Rama to be accessible to the general public, and at that time, few people could understand Sanskrit. In order to make the story of Rama as accessible to the layman, Tulsidas chose to write it in Awadhi, a local language. Tradition has it that Tulsidas had to face much criticism from the Sanskrit scholars at that time. However, Tulsidas remained steadfast in his resolve to simplify the knowledge contained in the Vedas, the Upanishads and the Puranas to the common people. The current Ram Leelas, or the dramatized version, which is enacted mainly in the north of India during Ram Navami, is actually Tulsidas' version of the Ramcharitmanas. The Ramcharitmanas is by no means a word-to-word copy of the Valmiki Ramayana, nor an abridged retelling of the latter. Ramcharitmanas has elements from other Ramayanas written earlier in Sanskrit and other Indian dialects, as well as stories from other Puranas. Now in Tulsidas' version, the original Sita does not get abducted by Ravana. Rama in this version already knows Ravana's intentions, so he orders Sita to place her shadow called Maya Sita in her place, while the original Sita would hide in a fire. So Ravana actually kidnaps the duplicate Sita and takes her to Lanka. Now Rama knows that it is the duplicate Sita that was abducted, and yet he goes to Lanka to wage the war and returns with the duplicate to be exchanged with the original. Perhaps this is the reason why Tulsidas doesn't mention anything about Sita going to the forest and is engulfed by the earth as a result of the gossip of the citizens of Ayodhya. Tulsidas refers to Sita as his mother as well as the mother of the entire universe many times in the poem, and so on an emotional level this becomes very understandable. She has endured enough pain throughout the Manas, and so Tulsidas might have wanted to give a happy ending to her story. Another Ramayana that I want to discuss is called Adhyatma Ramayana. In this version, the earliest episodes of Rama's life as depicted in the Valmiki's Ramayana, such as the story of Rama's birth, his training with Vishwamitra and the breaking of the bow at Sita's Swayamvara, are omitted. Sita is accorded more prominence in this variant of the Ramayana narrative, and she is the daughter of Ravana. This version also tells the background story of how the Rama avatar actually happened. The two sages, Narada and Parvata, fell in love with the avatar of Lakshmi named Srimati, who was born to a king named Ambarisha. Both wanted to get married to her, so the father arranged for a Swayamvara. Narada then went to Vishnu and asked him to turn the face of Parvata into a monkey without Parvata realizing it, so that she would choose Narada instead of Parvata. Vishnu said, "Okay, done," and Narada left. Now lo comes Parvata with the same request. Vishnu said, "Okay buddy, your wish is granted." So both Narada and Parvata came to the Swayamvara after having taken bath with Lux soap and wearing nice Christian Dior perfumes, and sat on their seats. But both Narada and Parvata appeared to look like monkeys to Srimati. The sly Vishnu also took a human form to come and sit beside both the monkey-faced sages. Of course, these were the days before mirrors were invented, so both sages could only see each other. And they started laughing at each other without realizing that they were in the same boat. Srimati looked at both the monkey-faced sages and then at the handsome man sitting beside them and chose the handsome man. Narada and Parvata realized that they had been taken for a ride by Vishnu and cursed him to be born on earth as a human and to roam the forest searching for his wife. And that is how this version of Ramayana explains the reason for the avatar. Interesting, isn't it? Now there is another version which is almost as famous, if not more popular, than the version of Valmiki. This is the Adhyatma Ramayana or spiritual Ramayana, written between the 13th to 15th century. The author is considered to be Vyasa, who wrote the Mahabharata, but there is an attribution of its creation to a Bhakti saint, Ramananda. It was written in Sanskrit but later translated into many other languages. In fact, the Ramcharitmanas, which I mentioned earlier, was inspired from the Adhyatma Ramayana. Now there are many differences between Adhyatma Ramayana and Valmiki Ramayana. For one, Adhyatma Ramayana is based on the Advaita Vedanta philosophy. It is definitely more spiritual. Valmiki depicts Ram as a perfect human being, while Adhyatma Ramayana elevates him as the avatar of Vishnu and gives him a lot of attributes and ideals which are related to spirituality and symbolism. The story of Ahalya, who was turned into a boulder by her sage husband, doesn't appear in Valmiki Ramayana but makes the appearance in Adhyatma Ramayana. Also, when Rama is asked to go to the forest by his father, Lakshmana blazes with rage. Rama then proceeds to give him advice in Vedanta style, which is present in Adhyatma Ramayana but not in Valmiki's version. He also gives a detailed description of knowledge, yoga and devotion to Lakshmana whilst roaming in the forest, which is a new addition in Adhyatma Ramayana. Also in this version, Sita too is elevated beyond what Valmiki imagined. Valmiki describes the abduction of Sita, where Ravana snatches Sita by her hair and drags her into the Pushpak Vimana. But in Adhyatma Ramayana, Sita's purity is preserved and Ravana doesn't even lay a hand on her. So she is untouched by any other man. My doubt is, what would have happened there? Could Ravana arrive in his aircraft, landed near to the circle drawn around Sita, and asked her to please board the aircraft without any further delay, as it was the final call for boarding, and Sita would have complied? I mean, sounds a pretty simple way to abduct someone, isn't it? Jatayu too has been elevated beyond what Valmiki imagined. While Valmiki wrote that Jatayu gives the GPS directions to Lanka to Ram and then dies in his hands, in Adhyatma Ramayana, Jatayu attains a spiritual form and sings hymns in praise of Ram. In this way, there has been many additions done to the so-called original Ramayana by the Bhakti poets. Now this Adhyatma Ramayana was translated into Malayalam by a person who was not a Brahmin named Ezhuthachan. In those days, when casteism ruled the country, it was forbidden for any other person from a caste other than the Brahmin to learn Sanskrit or write stories or songs in that language. But Ezhuthachan proceeded to write a poem named Harinama Kirtanam in Sanskrit. For this crime, he was banished to the present-day Andhra, where he must have heard about Adhyatma Ramayana. He learnt it and proceeded to translate it into Malayalam. He translated it in the form of Kilipattu, a South Indian genre in which a parrot recites the text to the poet. But this action angered the elitist Brahmin society and they sent people to capture the author. But Ezhuthachan had by then taught this to a few of his followers who used to memorize it by reciting it. There is a hearsay that to avoid being captured but to memorize it, they used to recite it during the month of Karkidakam, which is the heavy rainy season in the state of Kerala. The loud noise of the rain would eclipse the sound of the recital. Even today, there is a tradition of rendering of the Adhyatma Ramayana Kilipattu during the month of Karkidakam in Kerala. People, however, do not know the actual reason for why they recite it though. Even in Tamil Nadu, there is a tradition of rendition of Kamba Ramayana, which is the Tamil version of Ramayana, during the month of Adi. This is a perfect example of how traditions just come into being without people knowing the rhyme and reasons behind a practice. Of all the retellings of the epic, the most interesting one comes from the Malabar region of Kerala, an area predominantly occupied by the Muslim community. It is here that we get to hear the Mappila Ramayanam. The Mappila Ramayanam or Ramayanam comes from the tradition of the Mappila Pattu, the folk song of the Malabari Muslims. The essence of this folklore is that it is not just another verbatim retelling of the Hindu epic, rather it employs a lot of things from Islam. In this tale, when approached by Shurpanakha, Rama rejects her by pointing to the laws of the Sharia that say that she is already married and so cannot marry another man. Shurpanakha retorts by saying that the Sharia allows for a man to have 4 women while the woman is only allowed 1 man. The names used in the book speaks a lot about the influence of the Islamic culture interlaced with hints of Arabic and Persian. Rama becomes Lama, Ravana becomes Lavana, Sita is Kunyikutti Tangamol, Hanuman is named Anuman, and Shurpanakha's friend is even named Fatima. The final version that I want to discuss is the Gondi Ramayana. The Gondis are a group of ethnic people who live in central India. They have Dravidian roots, and in their Ramayana, Ravana is a good king who ruled over them. Rama and Lakshmana actually are antagonists who came to their land and killed their king to take over their kingdom. This may have something to do with what we used to call the Aryan invasion of India, when people from Proto-European areas came and captured and destroyed the Dravidian society already living here. Now Rama's Ayana has travelled even to foreign countries. These are some of the versions which are present mainly in Southeast Asia. All of these versions that you see on the screen are different versions of Ramayana in these countries. It also exists in Greek mythology. I'm sure you have heard of the story of Helen of Troy. Said to have been the most beautiful woman in the world, she was the wife of Menelaus of Sparta and the daughter of Zeus, who was the king of gods. Helen gets abducted by a guy named Paris, and this causes Menelaus to go with his brother Agamemnon and wage a war against Paris. This is known as the Trojan War. The war is one of the most important events in Greek mythology and has been narrated through many Greek literatures, most notably Homer's Iliad. So as you can see how a folklore which was popular amongst a few people about a common man who was picturized as a perfect man with perfect morals turns into a story and then gets injected with spirituality and philosophy and slowly becomes a divine creation. And as it gets handed down generations to generations, people introduce more stories as per their imagination, and finally the story ends up being a khichdi of many stories, some of it which stray away from the earlier versions or is completely different from it. But sadly, we have made some of these stories as part of our nationalistic pride. So if you see the history of travels of Rama, there are a few questions that arise. Which Rama was right? Which story is the correct one? Which Ramayana is the actual Ramayana? It's hard to decide if we actually see the history of the stories. Instead, let us learn to enjoy these as folklores and just as another story, and there is no need to attach any divinity to them. Appreciate the imagination and poetic beauty of the writers and carry on. But today, due to the current political climate, the story has been over-glorified, and the Rama of today is capable of deciding the fate of this country. Blind belief has forced the majority of the nation to start believing in fairy tales as if they were actual history. And that is not going in the right direction. I would like to thank my good friend Tommy Sebastian for his invaluable inputs and support in making this episode. I couldn't have done this on my own without his initial research into the topic. I hope you liked this video and that many of the information was new to you. Please share it with others if you could. I shall be back soon with yet another interesting episode. Until then, it's bye-bye from Pale Blue Thoughts.